I want to demystify what is the professional inspection. A professional inspection committee must be in place as soon as the professional corporation or order is created. The members of the board of directors have to adopt regulations concerning the professional inspection committee. We have to start with this. Our reference book is the Quebec Professional Code, which regulates the whole professional system. At the order of acupuncturists, the committee is composed of at least 3 members, and those members have to be member of the order, because we are evaluated by our peers. That's how the professional system works in Quebec. And those members must have at least 5 years of experience. The committee also has inspectors who are either members of the order or experts. When we have inspection on expertise, like medical doctors, physiotherapists, experts who are respected in their field. At the moment, we're 3 members and also 3 inspectors. So the goals of the inspection is, first of all, protection of the users. It is a common mission among all professional orders. It helps to prevent the risk of prejudice. For instance, when some foul play is involved, intentionally or not, it is better to be safe than sorry. This will help the practitioner to adopt an appropriate behavior according to the standards. As mentioned previously, ethics is internal management and deontology is external management. This will help to make sound decisions. The professional inspection is needed to standardize the practice, and we are here also to answer your questions concerning your practice. Things like any topic, record keeping, or so on. Don't hesitate to call us before proceeding any further. The goals of the inspection committee is to ensure competence and integrity that a practitioner has to maintain at all times during their years of practice. It is written in the Code of Ethics of Acupuncturists, starting the obligation to maintain an up-to-date practice, improve their skills, develop their abilities, attitudes, and behavior. Even before we had the directive on compulsory continuous training, we already had this obligation in our Code of Ethics. This article says that we have to improve and develop our professional abilities. It was already an obligation for compulsory continuous training. So there are 2 sections concerning the inspection. The first is overseeing the practice and the inspection of your competence. These provisions are written in the Professional Code and in the regulations of the Order of Acupuncturists. The first part pertains to the clinical practice. This is part of the annual inspection program. Some people here were already inspected or will be soon. I cannot tell you when you will be inspected because this is done randomly. In our inspection program, we can make about 10% of all the acupuncturists, of the 850 acupuncturists annually. Let's say for the year 2014-2015, we were able to make around 70 inspections. And this information is available in the next issue of the Order's newsletter called Le Point Source. And the annual program starts the 1st of April of each year. For your reference, in our bylaws on the inspection committee, and the same goes for the other orders, it is stated that the secretary of the committee will send you a notice 15 days prior to the day of your inspection. We do not have to call the member. We can inspect like anytime we want. We could simply send you a notice. And the inspector will call you to schedule the appointment on which you both agree. We have a new procedure since January 2016. We decided to send all the documents you need for the inspection by email. So you have to make sure your email address is right. If not, log in the Order's website to update your profile if needed. Now, concerning the location of your main office, the place where you practice most of the time, you have also to mention all other locations where you practice, including the fact that you do house calls. You have to mention it. We are not asking for your patient's address. It can't be done. But we have to know if you travel for your work, because there are risks of prejudice that are potentially involved. So, if you change your address, you have the obligation to inform the General Secretary of the Order within the next 30 days of moving. The Professional Inspection Committee has to make a file for every member who is inspected. Those provisions are in the bylaws of the Inspection Committee. So, do not be surprised if the inspector is asking you for some documents, like your resume, your professional experience, personal experience, your academic and professional career. We're going to ask you also for copies of your diplomas, certificates of training, continuous formation, and so on. The inspector will also ask you for copies of your advertising and publicity, and the certification vouchers for the calibration of your electrical device. The invoice for the pickup of disposal of needles container, and the inspection checklist is also in your file. The inspection report is finally the recommendations of the committee. And in this file, the final report of the inspector. You have to know that the role of the inspector is not to tell you what to do. So the final report has recommendations after analysis, and during that time the Professional Inspection Committee analyzes the data collected, and after the recommendations have been sent, we can communicate with the member for a personal follow-up. If there are things that you do not understand or recommendations that you don't agree with, do not hesitate to contact us so we can deal with your concerns. Sometimes a second visit is needed for control purposes. If we notice important flaws or deficiencies, we will meet the member shortly after to make sure that they've understood all the recommendations and made the appropriate adjustments. But if a third visit is needed, the member will be charged $250, as the Board of Directors of the Order has adopted a resolution on this subject. If you are not complying with the recommendations of the Inspection Committee, you can be accused of ethical misconduct, and in your case, it will be transferred to the syndic's office. I just want to remind you what we said yesterday. The rule is zero tolerance. So when we send you the recommendations, we're asking you to reply with a letter stating all the adjustments you've done accordingly. You have a 1-month period to do so. For every recommendation we are making, you have to write down the corrections. We can come back later to verify if you complied properly, even 5 years after the events. And that's how long we keep our records. For example, if you said in your letter that you will dispose immediately of the needles after use in the biohazard container, and that when we come back we notice that you do not do it in spite the fact that you told us in your letter that you will do, you are facing more serious situation because we will have to inform the syndic's office of this situation. In the past, a few acupuncturists were found guilty of not complying with the recommendations of the Inspection Committee. And the Article 156 of the Professional Code provides the sanctions. First of all, for every violation or offense, the fines range from $1,000 to $12,500. Second, your permit can be terminated or suspended for a period of time. And third, a letter of reprimand. And fourth, any other sanction voted by the disciplinary committee. For the follow-up in these situations, the Inspection Committee has the power to recommend the Board of Directors of the Order to force a member to successfully complete some course or training or an internship or both at the same time, or any other obligation as decided in a regulation adopted under the Article 90 of the Professional Code. After an inspection committee immediately informs the syndic's office if there's some good reason to believe that the member has committed a violation under the criminal or civil code. The committee has also to decide to go further with an inspection on the competence of the practitioner. If the inspection report indicates relevant problems in the clinical practice, you have to know that once the syndic's office takes care of a case, there's no further communication whatsoever between the inspection committee and the syndic's office. In every professional order, it's the same rule. The case is dealt with in total confidentiality. We have separate offices, but sometimes for the general public protection, the syndic can ask for some relevant details from the inspection committee. So in reality, there is no other conversation between the inspection committee and the syndic. We are not aware of who is under inquiry, and the syndic does not know who is inspected either. The professional inspection is totally confidential. So if the health professional doesn't talk about it, nobody will know, except the inspection committee, of course. Let's come back to this slide saying that the inspection committee shall inform the syndic if there are motives to believe that a member has committed a violation or any applicable law. No professional can act in derogation of the honor and dignity of the profession or the discipline expected from a member of the order. So, as you can see, the way the article is stated, it's very wide definition, which means that the disciplinary committee can include the fact that the member did not comply with the recommendations under this article of the Professional Code. We also said previously that we can do an inspection on the competence of the members. There are many ways to justify such an inspection. This can be done under a request from the Board of Directors or on our own initiative if the inspection report reveals important deficiencies. We can also do an inspection on the competence of the member, or if we have some information coming from the syndic's office following an inquiry that demonstrates wrongful acupuncture practice. Also, an inspection on competence can be ordered if a member witnesses some problems or lack of competence from a colleague. We can also start an inspection process on competence from an information coming from the syndic's office, an inspector, or a patient. Of course, we do not go blindly into this process. We have to verify these information in order to go forward, and we need a consensus of all members of the inspection committee. An inspection on competence implies much more work than a regular inspection of your practice. We will first have a meeting with the member, then we will have a hearing with a lawyer and a stenograph who writes down everything that is said during the hearing. This is a huge procedure, and there are fees for the acupuncturist. So, once the inspection on competence is done, we will proceed in the same manner as if it were a regular inspection, meaning that we will make suggestions to the Board of Directors, like to impose additional training, an internship, or probation time to the member. So, just for your information concerning competence, it can be anything from general knowledge, skills, behavior, the approach, management abilities, analysis abilities, competence on ethics, and it involves many aspects of your practice. Competence is knowledge, know-how, and to know how to be. So for the knowledge, it means theoretical material that you have learned in the acupuncture school. When we talk about know-how, it means that your practice is adapted accordingly, meaning the implementation of the theory in the clinical practice, and the know how to be is how to behave, the approach you have as a professional. I want to mention here that competence is the core value of the Quebec professional system. If you want to know more about this subject, you can go on the Interprofessional Council website, which contains a lot of information on many subjects. You can learn about the history of the beginning of the professional system in Quebec, the professional inspection, the disciplinary committees, and so on. Following the inspection report on competence, the powers of the inspection committee allows it to make recommendations to the Board of Directors of the Order on the different ways to correct the situation and make sure that the member complies with the standards and bylaws. You know that there is a provision on mandatory continuous training.
Alors, je vous ai indiqué le site pour vous rendre sur
We have the obligation to register the courses on the order's website. You have to log in, then click Member Access tab, then My Profile tab, then Modify My Profile tab, and finally the Continuous Training tab. You must note that the rules is 60 hours of continuous training over a 3-year period. Among those 60 hours, you're allowed a maximum of 30 hours of self-directed training and at least 30 hours of officially recognized training for a total of 60 hours. You cannot do, let's say, 40 hours of self-directed lessons and 20 hours of officially recognized hours. A question here is asked by one of the attendees. Can we do the opposite, like doing 40 hours of recognized training hours and 20 hours of self-directed lessons? And the answer is yes. You can have 160 hours of recognized training if you want to, and no self-directed training at all. It is the responsibility of the member to register those hours on the website and send a copy of the appropriate certificates if you had self-directed hours of training.
Mais tout ce qui vient de l'externe, en fait, là, vous devez acheminer une copie de vos attestations. Alors,
now, concerning the use of Chinese herbal therapy, there is a mandatory course you have to follow. Any member who uses herbs or recommends Chinese herbs to their patients must successfully complete the course. One of those classes, one named Toxicity of Chinese Herbs and Their Interactions with Prescription Drugs from Dr. Michael Chong, and also Herb Toxicity and Drug-Herb Interactions with Chinese Medicine from Bob Flaws. This is an obligation, whether you are using raw herbs or patent formulas. But recently, the board of directors decided that you do not have this obligation of following this course for the sole use of the Kwanlong oil. Also, now, concerning CPR class, it is now mandatory. The acupuncturist must follow a recognized training on first aid and CPR, especially dedicated to health professionals. And this training must be updated every 2 years. You can follow that CPR training with a recognized company or organization like the Red Cross, for example. And also make sure you are asking for the appropriate training, not the one for the general public, the one dedicated to health professionals. And this policy was adopted August 29, 2014 by the Board of Directors.